This is a follow on to our series last week where we talked about high level uh, requirements or building a business case for IT projects. We walked through kind of IT business 101 on what do we do for organizations that have either formalized or informal program management. I am your host for tonight, or guest speaker. Imad is the host. I'm at CTO advisor, and then playing the role of our CTO. We're going to do a little role playing tonight as Justin Warren of Pivot Nine. Justin has plenty of real world experience with reviewing business cases and kind of giving guys like me a hard time. So I look forward to him giving me a hard time tonight. All right, so let's do a quick recap from last week. So we talked about the factors of what makes up a business case or formulating a business case. I think the most important factor is for you to know your audience, know who you're going to be presenting to, know if they're a deep dive person or if they're a high level thinker, they just want the high level information, or if they, if something on the screen catches their attention and they want to go 2 or 3 levels deep, understand that organizational discipline when it comes to project portfolio management. Do you need to go through a formalized process to submit a project? Do you need to create a PowerPoint deck? Or is it simply just putting it on a post-it note and handing it to your director and saying, this is what I want to do? Know your audience and cater that business case to them. And then we talked about kind of the three main factors that make up the business case itself. I hinted that we will always have a risk slide, whether you're presenting it as part of a formal PowerPoint presentation or if you're submitted into some type of portfolio management system. We always have some type of risk. We may or may not have monetary, depending on your organization. If IT is just is a profit center, or if you're not expected to show ROI, you may not have a monetary slide. You may have a monetary slide talking about the expenses. That slide varies. And then regulatory or legal factors in why you're proposing the project. And then the one tip that I ended the session on last week was to, if you can, always piggyback on a business line project. In our example tonight, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm piggybacking on a business line project that was in the works before this IT ideal came up, and we'll show what happens. Not all the time. This is, I think, is a rare occasion where the scenario that I'm presenting happens, but it goes without saying that this whole thing can be extremely fluid. Before we get into the main presentation, our case study, did anybody have any questions from last week or need any further detail? I'll hold for questions. All right, with no questions, let's get started. So let's go over the company profile. This company is based off of a real company. Names were changed so that no one will be hurt, especially me with some type of non-disclosure that I don't know. I'm still liable for. This is circa about 2005, 2006. I've updated some of the material based on the requirements of this session. Basically, the company itself is a 1,500 employee company with $100 million in U.S. dollar revenue. It has 7 operating companies or BUs throughout 10 U.S. cities. The primary business is manufacturing and selling safety and information systems for highways. So anything from red light cameras to crash cushions to highway barriers is this company's business. Its value add over its competitors is that it does its own engineering. As such, these companies have pretty much operated autonomously prior to this proposal. The engineering team has come together from the different business units, decided that there's much more value in consolidating engineering resources. Therefore, all of the 7 BUs will no longer operate as independent engineering organizations, but single engineering organizations. As such, the project is going to cost about $5 million. That's a nice chunk of money for a company with $100 million in revenue. It just showed, I think I wanted to stress how important the project is to the company's perception of its place in the market space. IT, we're asking for about $500,000 of that $5 million project. So a really small amount compared to the overall project. The CEO of Acme Highway is not exactly warm and fuzzy about this $500,000 spend. IT in this organization is distributed. Each business unit, similar to the engineering, IT is dispersed in each individual business unit. My role, I'm new to the company. I'm coming in saying that, you know what, this engineering effort is a really important effort, but in order to support that, I think we need to make an investment in our network. And this is my bolt on to this project. The CEO has noticed the $500,000. That's a rather large outlay. They don't understand IT. I gave the example last week when, you have to compete against the guy in the manufacturing plant that wants to upgrade forklifts. If he wants to upgrade forklifts and I want to upgrade networking, the CEO of a manufacturing company is going to understand forklifts versus data center or networking. Therefore, he had some questions, and I've broken out my portion of the business case. While the overall $5 million project has been given a tentative green light, the $500,000 is on hold until I can make a case for why I'm requesting $500,000. So Justin will be playing the role of the CEO of this manufacturing company. Any questions about the case study before we get started with the role playing? I'm on Twitter, so you guys can hit me up on either at the CTO Advisor, or you can use the vBrownBag hashtag. I am watching the stream. All right, so this is where we're literally starting the slide deck. There's not going to be an awful lot of slides. I don't, especially when I'm presenting to C-level, I don't use an awful lot of slides. You can get caught up very easily. You'll see how I manage kind of the deep, detailed questions that Justin will take me through. So let's get started. Justin, thanks for having me over to talk about my project.
No, it's good. Thanks for taking the time to explain it to us. We're keen to understand a bit more detail about what's the plan here.
So we obviously see a lot of value in consolidating operations for our engineering group. One of the things, as I was reviewing the challenges faced by the group, one of the kind of things that stuck out to me was that as we consolidate groups, the ability for these groups to collaborate is kind of hampered by our current network. To give you an example, we have engineers in California, we have engineers in Alabama. They need to collaborate on their design files, which are really large files that are hosted in our outsourced data center. When these files were in California or separately in Alabama, and those teams collaborated on them separately, not a big deal. But when they need to use our wide area network to access those files, if we go in the way that we're configured today, we're going to have some mighty big challenges when it comes to accessing those files, specifically speed. Locally, when they access those files today, they open almost instantly. When they open the files in our 2B state, it might take about 5 or 6 minutes per file. So that's going to, I think, hamper collaboration. The second thing is obviously there's going to be a need to have collaboration space in between the engineers and remote sites. One of the obvious things that we would like to take advantage of is video conferencing. Our current network doesn't support reliable video conferencing. And then the last thing was, kind of engineering to going from an idea to a manufactured product. All of our manufacturing will be located in Alabama. So again, kind of echoing that first challenge where engineers need to collaborate on data, on information. The same challenge happens with our manufacturing facility where those plans and specs needs to get down to the plant. And when plant managers ask for changes, those changes can delay production of our products. So how I propose to solve this solution, or how the team proposes to solve the solution, we like to deploy a new network across all 10 Acme locations. So basically, we're looking to upgrade our network capability. You got any basic questions around that?
Yeah, a couple. For starters, one is why do we need to collaborate between sites, given that we don't today? What is the nature of the collaboration that's happening? I understand that we're consolidating our engineering functions, but is that something that is happening frequently, or that we envisage will be happening that frequently, that we need to have this constant collaboration between disparate locations?
Yeah, so an example was, if you remember, a couple of months ago, we decided to transfer the freeze-free product from one business unit to another business unit. In that transfer, I think it offered a perfect example of the challenge. The engineers in California were collaborating with the engineers in our Pennsylvania office. They initially sent the files over. They actually sent them over by snail mail because our network just wasn't robust enough to send them over. So they they copied the files to one of those USB big drives, dropped it in the mail. The engineers copied it. So this took about 4 or 5 days to do functionally. As we start looking at our engineers working on cross collaboration of files where, we integrate our freeze-free product with our crash cushion and test data, that type of information and knowledge transfer is going to happen much more frequently.
Okay. You used a couple of different terms there about replacing the network or upgrading the network. Can you explain to me a bit more about are we completely replacing all of the existing network assets, and putting in brand new ones, or are we adding to the existing network?
We are displacing the current network. Today's network is what they call a frame relay network. Technology's been around quite some time. It's quite reliable. However, the speeds and the connectivity from site to site doesn't meet our needs. So what we're going to end up doing is migrating those circuits or services from one provider to another provider. It's actually the same provider, just a different service. So those network assets, what we call the customer premise equipment, the equipment that we lease from the vendor, all that will be replaced.
Okay.
All right, so let's go into
continue with the presentation. Yeah.
All right. So again, just highlighting the proposed solution. So we're replacing the existing network, which leads your last question, with what we call an MPLS, just the current generation network. Basically allows us to communicate from one site to another site efficiently. In our network today, we kind of have this hub and spoke thing where if Alabama wanted to communicate with Pennsylvania, it had to go through Chicago, then from Chicago to our facility down in Alabama, and then from our facility in Alabama down up to Pennsylvania. The concept of MPLS allows any organization within our family of companies to communicate directly with each other. So much more efficient design. So obviously it's going to solve those bottlenecks we had. It's going to support a higher speed file transfer, to give you some of our sites are experience a 6-fold increase in data transfer speeds. Will provide the ability to use desktop conferencing, and then one of the side benefits, which is not a direct kind of not one of the direct scopes of the project, but just one of the side benefits. It'll enable remote access and remote worker technologies. So that challenge that we have where when you go home and you need to access files that were stored in the data center over in Massachusetts, and you're at home and there's nothing you can really do about it, this technology kind of solves that problem for us.
Okay, so that's something that we can't do today.
That is something that we can't do today.
Okay.
All right, so one of the things I wanted to talk about first are the risks. Kind of obviously these are big changes. So what are some of the larger risks? We do have a larger risk register that talks through some of the smaller risks, but I wanted to talk specifically around the things that concern me the most. One was the schedule. One of the things I've experienced when I've rolled out these similar projects is that the telephone providers, or what we sometimes call telcos, are notoriously bad for missing scheduled dates. While we have in our project plan nice and smooth dates, one of the things that I've constantly had a problem with is scheduling and having the telephone company show up, having the technology work the first time the right way. So there is a risk to the schedule if the telephone companies don't show up on time to deliver our services as expected. The schedule may slip, and we may not be able to make important dates from an engineering perspective. The mitigation for this risk is that we're going to leverage common broadband technology. So an example is Comcast cable. Those things can generally be installed within 30 days. We'll leverage VPN technology to create a secure connection over that internet connection while it's high speed and gives us similar speeds that we will expect in our MPLS network. It's not quite as reliable. So, we couldn't reliably have video conferencing calls. It's very similar to if you've ever used voice over IP over the internet, if like a Vonage service. Some days it's great and other days not so much. That would be the experience we'd have, and we'd have to use this mitigation. We're actually going to keep those in place, those circuits in place as a backup for if our internet connectivity or those new circuits that we're installing, if those things go down.
Okay. Have we looked into possibly contractual clauses that we might be able to establish penalty clauses, for example, if our providers don't meet their dates, and therefore if we miss an engineering date on one of these projects, that could completely eclipse the cost of this project. So is there some way that we can mitigate that financial risk with contract clauses?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've gone through this round of conversations with the telco vendors before, and we just don't have the size to leverage this. I mean, to give you a level of comparison, this is almost like a shopping cart type of purchase from the telcos. There's really not a lot of customization in these deals. If we wanted to have a customized deal where we have larger SLAs, which still wouldn't mitigate the complete financial risk, maybe 10% of the risk or some of the risk we're talking about, we'd have to be deploying hundreds, if not thousands of circuits to get any kind of real leverage. That's why it's critical that we get these VPN connections in. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the short answer is no.
The short answer is no, yes.
So we need to have a plan B in case this happens. All right. With the team, rather than just the telecommunications risk, the rest of the project team, have they done this sort of project before?
For the engineering portion of it, or the engineering consolidation for it, or specifically the IT side?
Yeah, the IT side of planning this, because previously we've had a very distributed IT team which worked in silos at the skills in-house to actually make sure that we spec'd out what's required, to understand all of the implications of how this needs to be put together?
Yeah, if you once we actually do not have the all of the skills needed in house to do all of the due diligence and all of the design work. You'll notice in the one-time cost, we are bringing in the CTO advisor to help out with the design and implementation. He's done the partner of that consulting firm has done this about 6 or 7 times for companies with our similar profile.
Okay. Do we have a part in the plan there to do some skills transfer so that we aren't completely reliant on this firm once the project has been completed?
Yes, we
I
do.
would hope that we'd be able to, rather than just it being a pure transaction, we'd be able to get a bit of skills transfer.
Yes, we do. Honestly, we wouldn't be able to. And that's a very good point. We need to call that out, and I'll update the risk register. I'll call that out as a risk. There is knowledge transfer in there, but as we know, knowledge transfer isn't enough to mitigate that risk. I need to think of a way to validate the success of that knowledge transfer, and I'll give that some thought and get back to you.
I'll make a note as well with the head of HR to get in contact with you about pre and post project skills assessments. That's certainly a part of the HR function that they should be able to help you with.
I appreciate it. And then the second thing that I thought about was security. I know in the past we haven't exactly been diligent when it came to security. Our data isn't incredibly sensitive. However, we have additional concerns with SOX audits. We need to close some gaps when it comes to our audit, and as well as the modern day threats are not necessarily after data, but after our resources. And as we expand our network, we will have more resources and will be a little bit more tempting to some of the network intruders or hackers out there. So the mitigation for expanding our risk profile, one of the things that the consulting firms that we're bringing in will be reviewing individual security policies. We're going to create a consolidated Acme Highway security policy. They'll be distributed to all our employees. We're working with HR to perform end-user training on security and the security awareness. And we're going to leverage centralized. This is, I think, something that I'm maybe a little overly excited about because I'm a technology hound. A lot of our sites actually, their ability to protect their internet access ranges from really robust in our Florida office to non-existent in our Pennsylvania office. That's very uneven. We're going to consolidate kind of our internet access, have it come through one point, and then we'll have a consistent internet access policy throughout the organization, which should help mitigate the security risk.
Okay, this area is something that I am particularly concerned about, given the nature of the organisation. So, if I mean, the putting all of our resources into the IT sort of thing, that's a key part of our competitive advantage. So having this combined engineering team designing all of our next generation products, there is substantial intellectual property there that is of value to the organisation. So I'm concerned about industrial espionage, particularly from nations that are not necessarily the United States, for example. I won't name any names, but I'm sure that you can think of some. I'm concerned about the fact that they would be very interested in some of our newer designs, and I certainly don't want to see these being manufactured at large discounts from places that are not the United States, which will then undercut our margins. So that sort of things does actually present a significant business risk. So I'm certainly interested in having a little bit more of an understanding about how the security risks will be mitigated. I understand that some of this is not specifically a new problem, that it does already exist, but to me it sounds like this is a prime opportunity for us to address that issue.
And I agree. I think one of the things that our consultants will be doing is performing a complete security assessment of each site. So we'll know what our security posture is prior to this effort, and then what our target posture will be post the effort. But I think I agree with you that I am still a little concerned about our ongoing effort. I think I need to get with the team and our advisors and think through not just how do we mitigate this specific risk for this project, but the next phase of IT security for our organization, or data security for our organization in general.
Now, I suppose this does actually touch on the same area that I brought up before around HR and ongoing training. We are creating a new type of organisation here, which is new to the company and new to the group. I'm keen to see some of this work that we're doing around the security posture and our understanding of how to do this, that skills transfer into the central group, so that they are well positioned to take on this responsibility in coming years, because that's going to be a key part of the new organisation, is that we will now have this central group who are responsible for looking after this. So do we have, as part of the plan, any detail on the team that will be taking over the operational responsibility for these systems?
Yeah, I think from a high level, I've already performed site visits, gotten an understanding from each individual HR manager on the overall capability of each individual site to perform IT tasks. Created a survey of kind of a high level overview of IT operations from a very high level. What's things like backup, testing backup, if there's the DR plan, when that DR plan, last time that DR plan was executed. And just like the Florida versus Pennsylvania security example, we're pretty much all over the place when it comes to capability. So I really appreciate you offering the help of HR to do a skills inventory and a gap analysis. I think phase 2, one of the things that the CIO and possibly you should get together and talk about is consolidating operations of IT under one leader. I know the existing model is to let there be autonomy, but I imagine that post this project, I know you're sponsoring it and will have good response for pushing out these new initiatives, but I'm really concerned about operations going forward, and if we'll have the political authority to continue to maintain this posture.
Yeah, I can see that it doesn't quite match up with the existing organisational structure that's been put to me. This is a centralised function. I would need to understand who is responsible. I mean, ultimately the CIO is, but I still want to have a bit more of an understanding of who, if this thing is not working, who do I call into my office?
No, so that's not that I can help with. I'll get a racy out with you, and I'll work with the IT team. And part of the gap, I think part of this gap analysis that we're going to do even before we kick off making any changes will expose kind of where we're soft at, and there being some type of owner that you can directly ask questions to.
Yeah, that would be good. And without wanting to push ahead too quickly, I think this does start to go on to my next question. I think your next slide is on the financial impact. So let's have a chat about that, because there are potentially some financial implications to what we've just talked about.
Okay. So from a high level, this project itself is just a breakout of the larger engineering project. So the whole return on investment, the NPV was based off of that larger project. I made a attempt at breaking out this project specifically. So from a simple ROI, we're looking at 33 months. We are the difference in what we pay our current provider versus what we're paying our future provider, and the backup links and software maintenance, etc. The OpEx difference is about we're positive $15,000 a month. So with a $500,000 easy math, look out, we're going to be whole in about 33 and a half months. The useful life of this network is 5 years. In another 5 years period, we'll be looking at doing a similar project. So if we use NPV, net present value measurement, where the project we're plus about $100,000.
Okay, so about 20%.
About 20%.
20% of the spend. Okay, that's pretty good value. I notice in the spending profile, you've got a lot of hardware parts, but a lot of what we were just talking about is, there's some money in there for advisory and contractors, which is about 40% of the total spend. Does that include the training and skills transfer portions that we just spoke about?
Yeah, so it'll be a combination of two. So the advisory services is figuring out. I think the from a managerial and executive leadership perspective, knowing what we don't know. So we're bringing in kind of high end help to help with that portion of it. The 80,000 is mainly staff aug. So after we've developed the vision and roadmap of how we're going to execute the project, these are the contractors that will actually be performing the work, and as part of that is documentation and knowledge transfers. That Sal.
I see on the cash flow NPV calculations, you're looking at complete spend in year zero. Is that right? Upfront. So we're doing an upfront capital expense.
We are doing an upfront capital expense, and I wasn't certain. I still have to get with our CFO, and understand how we perform. How do we charge back the consulting and contractor dollars, if we're going to capitalize that, or if that's going to be considered OpEx. So I didn't do any kind of math for depreciation, so I don't know if the $200,000 in services will be a depreciable amount, or if we'll end up eating that whole cost the first year.
Yeah, I'll get you some time with the CFO to run through those figures, because we should be able to spread out the spend over the life of the project. Certainly, revenue recognition from the contractors should flow with the project, depending on the implementation time frame, which is something that I'm not sure that I see there. What's the implementation time frame?
So, and I think that might have been a hang up the entire. If you notice if we go back to the NPV, there's no spend the follow on years, because we're looking to wrapping this up in about 6 months. The project has to be done in time frame to realize the business value.
Yeah, okay. So we're in a zero thing. Yeah, okay. Well, definitely have a chat with the CFO. I'll set some time up, because we may be able to spread out some of that cash flow, which that'll help save us some money for a start. We might also want to revisit that discount rate that you've chosen there, which may be a little high.
Yeah, I want it to be a little bit aggressive, so that I want it to be a little bit aggressive and go with a high discount rate, just to show that the project itself has a decent return.
No, conservatism is good. It's always a good thing. We will also probably want to get together with HR and look at some of the training expenses that may or may not be able to be capitalised. So hopefully we can work out some of that money side of things. But from the numbers I'm seeing here, that should improve things rather than get worse, which is good. One other question I see here is that the baseline comparison is current state. What other scenarios or options have you looked at as potential solutions for this
So other things we looked at was doing. There's additional technologies such as there's a technology called Citrix. Actually, we use it to access. You actually use it to access our Lotus Notes. So you know how you log into Citrix and then you're presented with your Lotus Notes interface, and it's a fairly decent experience. There's a option in which we could have used potentially Citrix as a solution to the data transfer problem. So basically, the CAD files and intelligence would exist in the data center in Massachusetts. Users would connect via Citrix and access basically AutoCAD and the CAD files remotely. We actually ran a pilot. The problem that we ran into is that the ability to Citrix just wasn't robust enough for AutoCAD. When we put a load of more than 5 users on the server, the experience was suboptimal and connections kept dropping. That was one option. Another option was, if you notice, we looked at that. If you notice I think I might have had a breakdown here. The secondary circuits, these backup circuits we're using, are significantly cheaper than the primary MPLS circuits that we're using by a factor of 10. So we looked at potentially using just the secondary circuits versus getting this MPLS. Once we ran kind of the scenario past our technology advisors, they said one of the biggest things that we'll be challenged with will be consistent experience when it comes to technology that we're counting on to save money and travel, which is the video conferencing. They just weren't confident that we could reliably use that type of service. And they also talked about skill level when it came to maintaining that. We'd have to do that ourselves versus our managed service provider. I do want to keep my eye on this. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm negotiating a 3-year agreement for the primary circuit. So if we get to a point where that technology is a little bit more reliable, we have the potential of saving quite a bit of money and just having basically the secondary circuit cost doubled by 2. We get 2 at each location and drop that MPLS circuits, and that in 3 years we potentially save quite a bit of money. So those are the 2 other options we explored.
Okay, that sounds reasonable, and it sounds like we've got we have a plan B, and we also have a forward view on what we will do. And as you say, the lifetime of this gear is around 5 years, so it's quite a bit less than a forklift. I'd like to be aware of what we can do with it, and if we can manage to move to something cheaper faster, then and get the same experience, then that sounds good.
Great. So I think that's everything I had. I had a couple of technology slides in case you were interested, but I know that stuff kind of it's one of those eye roll things that can get to. But did you have any other questions for me?
No, not really. I mean, that's why we pay you the money, to understand how this works. So my job isn't to second guess you and do your job for you. It's just to make sure that that you've understood our priorities and what we're trying to do. And it sounds like you have. You've looked at the possible solutions that we could do, and it does sound like you've come up with a pretty good one. There's a few minor details to be worked out, I think. So I'm willing to give this tentative approval. I do just want to see a bit of an update after you've spoken with the CFO and HR. Just tighten up some of those figures and the spend profile, and a little bit more understanding about the structure that we're going on. And I'll take up that conversation with the CIO as part of our larger restructuring discussion.
All right, I'll get with Jennifer to schedule some time in the next week or so.
Fabulous. Okay. Good job.
Thanks. All right, so that's the end of the role playing. We only lost like 2 or 3 people in that whole deal. Anybody have questions on or feedback on the process and any questions that Justin asked, or anything that any questions on kind of the the angle I took?
Don't know that we've got any questions on the feed.
There's no questions in the GoToMeeting.
Uh,
I must admit, it's a lot more fun being on this side of the table.
yeah. Well, I haven't been on that side of the table. I don't think ever. So we'll have to switch on the. We'll have to switch next time.
So we do have, I guess, a more of a comment. Surprised that HR gets mentioned so much.
Oh, Justin, you wanna take that one, or you want me to comment on that one?
I'll make a comment, then you make a comment. You're the one who came up with the scenario. So you have the last word. It's something that does get overlooked by technologists quite a bit. From a business management perspective, I mean, you hear a lot of rhetoric about people are our greatest resource. One of the biggest risks of a technology project is the people and process around it. It tends to get overlooked, and in this case, we have an IT organisation who's going to be implementing. Well, we've got people change, organisational change, as well as technology change all at the same time, and it's a new thing that's going to be given to a group of people who hasn't done this before. So as a CEO, I need to understand that the people that I have tasked with this are able to do it now, but also able to look after it in another year or so, because if this is what we're going to be doing in future, I need people who know how to look after it. The same way as I need to have people who know how to look after forklifts and how to design our gear, and salespeople who know how to sell it.
Yeah, and I've personally had projects that have gone horribly bad because we've collectively underestimated the HR portion of the project. Something as simple as and it's not simple, but going from Windows XP to Windows 7, so a desktop rollout. There's not a huge difference. When you're a technologist, there's not a huge difference between XP to Windows 7. But I've gotten into like union disputes over that upgrade. We had to halt. This is like a 12,000 user environment with 85 sites, and we had to halt the Windows 7 upgrade because we didn't consider that end users needed training to go from XP to 7. People who are on the lower end of the knowledge worker scale, it's jarring for them to go from using Windows XP because they know exactly where they come in. They hit this start button that looks a certain way. They go to this interface, this part of the start menu, and they launch this application. And when we change that interface, it's a huge, huge deal. Since then, if it can be SAP or an Oracle app, PeopleSoft, it doesn't matter. When you change the tools or expectations, the technology expectations of a workforce, you're going to get some surprising response from an HR perspective.
Yeah, and just to put another comment in there and throwing it back at techos who might be listening to this, either now or in the recording. Imagine if you are used to using Outlook, and then I, as the CEO or CIO, say, right, as a project, we are globally going to swap to Lotus Notes. And all of you get to use Lotus Notes. There's no training. We just expect that you'll be able to pick it up and run with it. How do you feel? That's something that you need to keep in mind for projects. It's not necessarily just about how people need to do their jobs. It's about how you make them feel when you enforce change on them.
Yeah, I think
Every time you mention Lotus Notes.
and I think our friends at the big storage vendor might be feeling the same thing about their Macs.
Yeah. Look, I have used Lotus Notes, and I'm glad that I don't anymore.
I've used Lotus Notes as recently as last year, so there you go.
There were some bits in Lotus Notes that are actually really quite good.
No, I used it as my primary mail platform for 2 years, so there you go.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. All right. So I don't see anything else on the feed, unless anyone on the conference call has questions. I had a great time. This was fun.